Good day to the very respectable panelists, together with the class research advisor, Ma'am Marie Gabriel Chavez. Yours truly is Marc Abad, and let the researchers take you through the team's evaluation on the reduction of carbon footprints of Quezon City residents under the novel coronavirus 2019 or COVID-19 quarantine protocols. The increase in the world's carbon footprint, according to the Earth Science Organization Earthshaker, is an environmental issue on which the Philippines is considered as a relatively small contributor to, but is certainly a national concern that must be addressed. An infographic posted by Earthshaker's Facebook page shows the comparison of the 2018 carbon dioxide emissions of the Philippines compared to the other countries that are vastly populated and have greater land masses. It shows that the country contributes only about 0.4% of the global CO2 emissions, way smaller than that of China, which is the top contributor in the said year. Fast forward to the year 2020, just a week after the implementation of the enhanced community quarantine on March 16 due to the pandemic, the clear sight of the Sierra Madre mountain ranges gave Filipinos living in the national capital region a glance at what living with better air conditions would look like. With the majority of the metro's 2.5 million fossil fuel reliant motor vehicles off the road, air quality in the city was visibly improving. However, on May 16, just 2 months after, a study conducted by both the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air and Greenpeace Philippines reported that with the easing of quarantine regulations and the return of motor vehicles around the capital brought on by the modified ECQ, air pollution is gradually making a comeback. Coincidentally, statistics shown on Whitechart's website illustrate that from 74.5 million metric tons in 2009, the country recorded an annual 140.10 million metric tons of CO2 emissions in 2019. In just a decade, the increase in the country's emissions doubled, which, unlike the unobstructed view of Sierra Madre, is clearly not a good sight. With that being said, discussing the significance of this study will be Jamille Odsinada.
Thank you, Marc Jonel. For the significance of our study, we made three logos that will represent how important our study is to our society. The significance brought by the proposed study are the following. The first logo represents carbon neutrality, and by assessing the survey answers given by the respondents, the researchers are able to infer the status of carbon neutrality of Quezon City residents. Carbon neutrality or net zero carbon dioxide emissions means reducing as many carbon dioxide as possible and then balancing those that cannot be eliminated through removals. It is a state of balance between the carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere and the carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere. Next is the second logo, represents the information dissemination, where the proposed study will enable the researchers to shed a light on a carbon footprint and why people should be at this worry or be cautious of their impact. And lastly, our third logo will represent carbon footprint awareness, and with the help of the formulated online survey, the researchers are able to highlight on how many people are truly aware of the term carbon footprint. While having the potential to be a shred of counter-evidence for common people's carbon footprint misconceptions, the results can also provide supplementary data for the city's authorities, while influencing people the importance of mitigating air pollution even after the current pandemic. Next is our objectives, which will be discussed by Marc Andre Bermundo.
Thank you, Jamil. The researchers introduced three research questions in our rationale that will serve as the basis for the hypothesis made by the researchers. The questions pertain to the implications of the study, its undertakings from the selected participants, and providing general knowledge at the end of the proposed study. Next slide, please. After accounting for the contrived hypothesis and research questions, the researchers will now confer to the engineering goals that the researchers brought up for the proposed study. The four engineering goals that the researchers set upon for this proposal are the following. Number one, This study provides a discussion on the importance of measuring and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, especially in a pandemic where everyone is limited on their movement due to the severities in their areas. Number two, the study will reflect on the significant effects of lesser carbon emissions in urbanized areas with high populations. Number three, the study will estimate the impact on generated carbon footprint reduction before and after the lockdown by tallying the information given by the respondents alongside with determining other factors that affect the given information of the said respondents. And finally, the project is a substantial evaluation and can be a basis for other scientific studies that is more oriented on data to infer about the reduction of carbon footprints. The next slides will be the methodologies used in this paper, to be presented again by Jamille Grace Odsinada, and I will be giving the virtual microphone for her to showcase it.
Thank you, Marc Bermundo. For our methodology, we researchers use 5-point Likert scale, which is commonly involved in research that employs questionnaires. It is the most widely approach to scaling responses in survey research. 5-point Likert scale is a type of psychometric response scale used to measure attitudes or opinions in which the responders specify their level of agreement to a statement typically in 5 points. And these are strongly disagree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, and strongly agree. Our platform for submission is Google Form. Since we are still in a pandemic and Google Forms are widely used to create surveys easily and quickly since it allows us to ask questions to our respondents and collect diverse type of information in a simple and efficient way. The questions from our form were tailored to suit the demographics of the respondents, which are the residents coming from the Quezon City. Quezon City were placed in different sections where it was ranged from different areas where people contribute more to their carbon footprint. On the following slides, you will have a view of our survey form. Next is the results and discussion, which will be discussed by Kryzei Turingan.
So for the results and discussion, the online survey conducted was divided into four main parts, and the first part is the demographics. Based on the collected data, 59.5% are female and 39.5% are male. 0.8% are still in elementary, 50.6% are still in high school, and 11.2% are still college undergraduates. For the age range, a total of 190 respondents fall between the age range of 17 to 20 years old, and 92 respondents fall between 14 to 17 years old. Unexpectedly, only 24 respondents fall between the age range of 38 to 62 years old. Given that the majority of the respondents are students, only 10.6% of the respondents are married and 0.8% are said to be separated. For the living status, 29.4% are homeowners and 37.4% are living with their relatives within Quezon City. 32.2% are renting a house in Quezon City. For the employment status, given that majority of the respondents are students, there are only 13% of the respondents that are employed and 3.9 are unemployed. Next slide, please. For the last part of the demographics, since the study is limited only to Quezon City, the researchers easily found out that the most numbers of respondents came from District 4 with a total number of 96 respondents. There were also 12 cases of false positives coming from Bulacan, Malabon, Makati, Rizal, San Juan, and a duplicate response. So the second part of the online survey encompasses questions that tackle on the general concept and assessment of people's awareness regarding carbon footprint. It was found out that the researchers found out that 22.1% of the respondents are unaware of what carbon footprint is, and that 19.7 are apprehensive that their daily habits affect the environment's total carbon footprint. Um, on the other hand, 90.9% of the respondents agreed that the lockdown caused by the current pandemic affected the country's total carbon emissions for the past few months. And lastly, 60.8% agreed that agreed on planning to do something to reduce their carbon footprint during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Um, so the third and fourth part of the online survey were focused on the actions taken in reducing carbon footprint before and during quarantine period, respectively. 16 scenarios were given, patterned five point from a 5 point Likert scale test from a study made by Adanza in 2016 entitled um, Barriers to Mitigate Carbon Footprint in a Selected Academic Institutions in Bacoor City, Cavite, Philippines. The infographic displays, and then the researchers set an equivalent value to easily get the level of adherence for all of the scenarios. It was the infographic displays the extent of level of adherence taken in reducing carbon footprint before the quarantine period. It was found out that only scenarios 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 12 have a quantitative index of high adherence, while the rest of the other scenarios acquired or accumulated a very high adherence. Next slide, please. The last part was focused on the actions taken in reducing carbon footprint during the quarantine protocol. And then it was found out that only scenarios 2, 3, 6, and 12 have a quantitative index of high adherence, while the rest of the scenarios acquired a very high adherence. With all these informations, the researchers concluded that the respondents of the survey put measures in reducing their carbon footprint in a responsible manner, giving the um, giving the giving the survey a positive response. With having only very high adherence and a high adherence. So next slide, please. Results and this conclusion and recommendations. The researchers concluded that there is a very high adherence among the residents of Quezon City to their measures of reducing their carbon footprint. For the recommendations, the first recommendation was that um, there may be problems in the collection of data using online platforms such as Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, Typeform, and JotForm in a densely populated urban area just like the Quezon City. Next slide, please. There were also issues regarding the respondents. First is that most of the respondents may be using on mobile data connections while answering the online surveys. Next is that some of the respondents may leave out incomplete address, giving only familiar area in their place instead of the complete address. And lastly lastly would be that the many older respondents may need assistance um in accessing or answering the surveys in an online form since they may not be familiar in the usage of it. Last recommendation would be that the local government, especially Quezon City, must enhance enforcement of green management to tolerate and maintain advocacies in the city to mitigate the carbon footprint. Next slide, please. That will do it for the presentation of the research study entitled Evaluation on the Reduction of Carbon Footprints of Quezon City Residents under the Novel Coronavirus 2019 Quarantine Protocols. Thank you for listening.